God puts Adam in the Garden of Eden. He comes to him and he tells him, Adam, you're free to eat of everything you see except for one tree over here. Stay away from that one. You know, this passage tells us a lot about God. It really does. It tells us a lot about God's choice for freedom. Because God doesn't want people to just serve him because they are told to do so. Here in the garden, Adam is gifted an opportunity to see things that up to this point he didn't have to think about. And the reason that Adam is forced to think this way, as we know, of course, is because in heaven, Lucifer said, I have a plan to reign in opposition to God, and you need to follow me. And of course, it worked very masterfully as he took out a large portion of the angels who chose to follow him. And so God brings Adam to the place where he gets to choose. He doesn't want Adam just to serve him because God says so, just because God created him. He wants Adam to serve him because he loves him. The interesting part about Adam is probably up to this moment he never would have had a thought not to do this, not to love God, not to serve God. And yet God brings the question here, Adam, you get to choose this tree or all the others. I give you all the others. My wife loves to think of heaven that there's going to be just nothing but avocado trees, I think. She loves those. A good tree, right? It's an awesome tree. Me, I'm an avocado person once it's had a few other things thrown into it. Adam has a choice. God's given him a choice. Satan's accused God of being, not fair, and God is saying, Adam, choose. If you go on in the story, you see the test is going to come in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. It tells us the serpent's there. He's a crafty serpent. He's more crafty than all the wild animals the Lord had made, and he has an opportunity to talk to the woman, and he says to her that those words that will forever change our world. Did God really say, you can only eat this? It's interesting that Satan's focus is on the one thing that God says, don't do. He doesn't talk about all the millions of other things she can do. He tries to direct her attention to that very one thing that God says, don't do. And it works so well because he is able to get her to think in a direction she wouldn't think had he not put that doubt there. But he doesn't tell her the real story. He doesn't tell her the actual result. She throws that in there. She says, we can eat of this tree in verse 2, but God says don't, because if you do, you're going to die. And of course, Satan is going to throw back his only tactic that he can say, well, it's a lie. It's not going to happen. You won't die. God knows when you do this, your eyes are going to be open. You're going to be like God. You're going to know good and evil. The first thing Satan does is to remove the fear of disobeying God. The year was 1967. We had just moved out of Oakland, California. My parents were impressed to leave the city that we were in. They moved out to a little town about an hour north of San Francisco. My dad was working to build a church for the church that was in that little town of Sonoma, California. January of that year, a concert or a gathering is held in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. 30,000 hippies attend. Before that gathering, he stands a man who's trying to bring about a change. He has a new vision for society. His name is Timothy Leary, and he has a motto that he's going to try to bring to the masses, one that he believes is going to help them. And his motto is turn on, tune in, and you remember the saying? Drop out. Turn on. He wants people to activate their own level of inner consciousness. Look inside of you. Realize your potential, as it were. Tune in. There's something that he wants them to think about how they're interacting with the world around there. Let's create a harmony that maybe doesn't exist. And to his credit, potentially, we were in a world at that time that really wasn't in harmony, and much like a world we're in today, really. We had a war going on, and then people were not favorable. A lot of protests to that. Make love, not war was a wonderful motto, but the last part of this is drop out. So get out of society that isn't working, basically. Become part of a world that you are self-reliant. Find or make your own history, your own reality. During that movement, he's promising, basically what he couldn't really deliver. Through the use of drugs, which was a very powerful tool, psychedelic drugs, LSD and heroin and other things really changed the whole society. I remember as a young boy at that time, we had a neighbor across the road. We lived on a gravel road about a half mile long, and a neighbor on this side, a couple houses down, he had a son he became a hippie. Got his Harley Davidson, got the leathers on. He was going to ride with the Hells Angels, and he was doing drugs. And his father watched his life slowly unravel. Another neighbor friend who was a few years older than me, he moved out of his parents' house, lived in their camper, and he was spending his time doing LSD, and his mind was becoming, shaped by his world. There was a commercial on TV at that time. The commercial scared me as a young boy because it showed a family around a dinner table and upstairs in their little small house, their son goes. And he goes into the bathroom. I can still see this, picture this, and you see him. He's getting out the hypodermic needle. He's shooting himself up with heroin. And the commercial is trying to make parents aware of the drug problem that's ravaging the youth. Scared me so bad I never wanted to touch that stuff. But it's what Timothy Leary is offering. A way to transform your world. Drugs was a huge part of it. Free love was another part of it. It was a philosophy of a new age that was trying to take sensuality and esoteric ideas and formulate a value system, actually a religious system that would transform with the desire to bring healing and harmony. Eve goes to the tree. The fruit looks good. You see it in Genesis 3, verse 6. It's pleasing to the eye. It's desirable to gain wisdom. She wants this. It looks good, it's pleasing, desirable. It's promised to do something to transform her that a way that God is supposedly not going to be able to give. She is becoming a victim of Satan's new theology. Actually, the phrase New Age, which we are well versed in today, was one that was first coined by Alice Bailey. I don't know if you know who Alice Bailey was. She was born in the 1800s, and she is someone that had a spiritual awakening or experience. A man comes to her dressed as a well-dressed suit and a turban on his head, and he tells her, "I've got a plan for your life. I have a mission for you." And this person would later go on to be someone that she would telepathically dictate writings to her through. Alice Bailey is one who talked about this man as a master of wisdom. She would go on later with her husband to create a publishing company to publish her works called Lucifer Publishing Company, later called Lucis Trust. She believed in what was to become what she defined as the age of Aquarius. Not a psychological, wake up, Steve. A term that we use today that actually ties into the signs of the zodiac. If you ever read your horoscope, you're familiar with the signs of the zodiac. People used to do that just for fun, just to see what their horoscope reading would be like. I think it's rather foolish to ask the devil how your day should go, but that's the way people do it for fun anyway. But in doing so, she was one who began to put in motion a belief system that would ultimately become mainstream. Our world today, New Age thinking is permeated in every segment of society. It's something that was considered to be a little bit crazy years ago, but today it's something that you may not realize how much it's actually influenced our world. Around the year 1969, just a couple years after Timothy Leary encouraged people to tune on and to tune in and drop out, a song comes into play. You may have heard this song when you were growing up. If you're as old as me or older, you may have heard it. I remember going to the shopping mall and hearing these songs in the elevator in the stores, and it was titled by a group called The Fifth Dimension, The Age of Aquarius. One of the lyrics to the song goes a little bit like this. It says, they're speaking of a time when peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. It's about relationships. It's about bringing someone into a harmony with the world and to center themselves with love and peace and being aware of the ecology and the planet you're on. It's a self-awareness. I went to YouTube to see what people were saying about this song. I forgot how it went. I started to play a little bit and go, I don't need to listen to that song again. I remember it from a kid. But I was surprised at what people's comments were on this one particular person's version of that song. It's back in 1969. It's showing that group singing their song, and people were very favorable. A woman named Sharon said, I heard this on the radio in 1969. How did they know that this would actually happen? We are entering a time of peace and love. Ancient prophecies told us about this time. I didn't expect that kind of response. Another person said, the song makes me so happy and emotional. I can feel so many of us longing for this reality. I think the age of Aquarius is upon us. Another person said, the world needs this song more now than ever. And the last person who I wrote down here says, now I understand this song. I thank God for every step I've taken to get to this exact point in my life. All is worth it. All is shining. All is truth. All of me. New Age believes that if you just open up your mind, you can become like God. Satan's lie is still working today. Pew Research did a survey of a group of persons. Pew Research mainly researches when the church, but they did within our society, and they found that 56% of people in our country still believe in the God of the Bible. You say, well, that's not bad. We go back and look at a few years before this, and it was 80%. We're on a trend that's not going upward, it's going downward. We are in a world today that the truth is that what is set in motion changes every segment of society. And it changes how we as a church think about reaching the society around us. Because if our world is truly looking for an age to come that isn't an age that God says is coming, how are you going to reach them? Survey goes on to say that they segmented out certain segments of society, certain people, certain racial and ethnic groups, and even political parties. If you adhere to those segments, you actually have a stronger belief in New Age. I remember as the 1980s started to dawn, we were living in, Northern California, North Bay, and we began to see little shops creeping open everywhere and little bookstores opening everywhere that were presenting all kinds of New Age thinking and New Age artifacts. People were into pyramids, and they were into all the kinds of the wizardry and all of those things. The books just began to talk about how positive this was and how you could channel this energy and how it could change your life. Shirley MacLaine comes on TV and she is a prophet or a evangelist for the movement. And many others are speaking about how powerful and how influential this can be. New Age tells us that we're on a spiritual journey to self-awareness, that we can trust our own ability to discern truth. Isn't that what Satan told Eve at the tree? I know God said that, but Eve, it's really like this. Trust your own self. Today we are learning to love ourselves in a way that maybe not be as healthy as God would choose it to be. We are learning to follow our hearts in a way that God is not leading our hearts. Today we are following in a belief system that actually is leading us away from God. New Age has an interesting dynamic to it. There is a positive side to it that actually we as Christians and Adventist Christians can adhere to. The New Age system actually believes that, you should live a healthy lifestyle. We believe that. We support that. Including vegetarianism is one of the New Age proponents, one of their value systems. But they also believe that things that maybe are a little bit more challenging to believe, consciousness expansion, green policies, that we need to protect our earth. And while we believe in those things, the focus needs to go towards our relationship with God. It gets a little more challenging than that. New Age has practices that are somewhat difficult for Christians to realize. One of the practices is called Reiki. A number of years ago, my wife and I were going to see her aunt who lived in Nevada at the time. She has since passed away. And her aunt had been raised in a home that wasn't particularly a Christian environment, but she had been going to church. She had become acquainted with religion and God and those experiences, but she had also become more acquainted with the New Age philosophies. And so she began to practice what is known as Reiki. And Reiki is a practice where you believe there's a universal energy force out there that you as a Reiki practitioner can channel that or direct that to bring healing into someone else's life. And she would talked about experiences where she would put her hands on people, feel this energy go through, and supposedly bring healing. But what she also told us was far darker than that. Because in order to get to that place, she had to have a spiritual guide or mentor to work through her. A spiritual mentor that actually ultimately betrayed her and abused her, and someone that scared her nearly to death. Thankfully, God freed her from that. She began to take Bible studies and she began to learn about God and who he really was, and she surrendered her life to God. And I remember going to her house right at this transition period in her life, and we were there. She'd accepted God. She'd decided she wanted to follow him, and yet she was still immersed in all of this occult ideology all around her. And so we came into her house, and you could feel that presence. It's a dark presence. It's an oppressive presence, and yet you could also sense that God was trying to set her free. We prayed with her, and she removed all of the things that she had used to practice this mystic art, and God did set her free. For me, the journey through this process took a little different turn. When I was in my early 20s, I was going to college, and one of the classes I took as an elective was therapeutic massage. People love massages, by the way. It feels good. You get your back all worked out. I can say this because the woman who taught the class was very good at massage, and she taught us a lot of things about how to manipulate and to massage the body and different techniques to use. And all of that seemed very good, and it worked very well until she brought us down to the part that didn't work so well. She talked about an energy force that goes through the body. She talked about how you as the practitioner are able to utilize that energy. And she taught us that how you would start up at the head and the neck, go to the shoulders, the back, down to the legs, and you into the feet, and you take that energy and you take it out through the body and you slowly release it out. The negative energy that's in them goes away. You never take your hand off the person's body when you're massaging them. Put the oil on there and you keep massaging, and ultimately it's that energy connection. When she shared that part, it was like, oh, this does not work for me. I don't believe that. I'm not going to accept that. The reality is, friends, you don't get a choice when you partake of that. A few years later, I took a class in martial arts, and the person there was talking about how you use energy in the defense of yourself. I share these things with you because there was a point in my life not long after that God kind of woke me up and said, Steve, you're going down a track that this is not right. And so I realized that I needed to abandon these ideologies, these thinking, these things that, I had partaken of, and yet at that moment when I tried to do that, the devil said, seriously? You think I'm going to let you go that easy? You think you can just switch teams willy-nilly as you want? And it became one of the darkest periods of my life, and I've shared a little bit of this with you before. I'm going to share a little bit more right now. It became to the place where the devil came to me and said, you are destined to die. I'm going to keep you on my side, and God will never take you back. I went to God's Word, and I began studying every passage I could find to somehow deal with this conflict. I couldn't find anything. It was like my eyes were closed to the truth. And I would plead with God, help me to see this. And it was a period of months. Samantha could tell you, I was in desperation. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking, I'm lost. I'll never be able to go to heaven. I'm never going to be able to have eternal life. I've gone too far. When Satan meets Eve at the tree, he doesn't tell her where he wants to take her. He only promises her something that he cannot deliver on. He only promises her that it's going to be better, but he doesn't tell her how it's going to go once she follows him. New Age healing is something that, in many respects, people are longing for. They're looking for it without traditional religious ties. People who are involved in the New Age will see Christianity as something that is restrictive. You hear people today say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. It's a very powerful statement. It seems to be more holy than religion, that somehow I am better off because religion is corrupt and people who practice religion have only bad motives and do all kinds of bad things, and you hear all that kind of stuff. But what I'm trying to do is seek a higher existence, a higher level of being. But yet New Age tries to tell us that you can become like God. God is in everything, pantheism. The Adventist Church has a unique history with this journey that was one of our original founders, Kellogg, who we know the family went on to make Kellogg's Corn Flakes. He went into pantheism, believing that God is in, everything, and somehow that, if you can tie into that, you can find God. But our world today is following this in a way that we have yet to see the end. We believe that everything is relative based on what you think is relative. Everything is basically up to you to decide, to validate your own truth. New Age believe life continues after death. New Age is the actual argument that Satan is putting here at the tree, telling Eve, you can disobey, you can do what you want, eat of this fruit, there will be no consequences, you'll live forever, you'll never die, and God knows it's going to be better for you. Yet the book of Romans tells us the wages of sin is, well, death. But the gift of God is eternal life. John 3:16, that Jesus tells us that God loved the world so much that he gave his son so that we wouldn't perish. Satan doesn't tell Eve, you are going to die if you do this. He doesn't tell her you are going to perish. But that's the truth. Came across a quote that I'd forgotten about, one that I encourage you in a little book to read called Steps of Christ, page 21. It's a beautiful little sentence, and it says this: the heart of God yearns over his earthly children with a love that is stronger than death. Isn't that amazing? God's love is so strong for you that death cannot take you away from him. It's stronger than the power of death. That God's love is so intense, that God's love is so powerful, that if you die, he's promised, Jesus has promised you, I'm the resurrection, I am the life. If you believe in me, you will live for eternity. It's not the lie that Satan said, it's believing in the one who gave his life so you can live. The title of our message dealt with death. More powerful than death. The only thing more powerful than death is God's love. Everything else is a deception and a lie. It is geared to destroy you. So we have a choice as a church. We have a choice to try to think about how are we going to reach the world around us who doesn't understand this. The survey that's recently said that Christians are more afraid to die than those who are not Christian. I thought about that and I said, how can this be? You know, we have the hope of eternal life. How can Christians be more afraid to die than those who are not Christian? And then you realize they believe the lie. They believe it's fine. They believe they're being taught and they're actually being made to feel secure in believing the lie. When Eve took from that tree, she felt secure that she was going to get the object of what she desired. Satan has the ability to make those who are turning against God, who are following his deception, to feel that they are doing the right thing. We have a responsibility to help people see it's all a deception. I think we need to pray that God helps us to help others see the truth.